right. Let's see. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope you can hear me and see me. Got my glasses. Uh, got my water. Hey, Ian says letting juicy RPG content fade into the ether. Yeah, it was so just so I'm not too inside baseball. I've been playing in Daniel, aka Bandits Keeps, I guess home game. He doesn't actually play out of his home, but his game, home game, and the game night is Thursdays. Hey, Frederick, happy Friday! So I make my way over to the gaming location, and when I get there, I realize, or actually, after I sent him a message saying, "Hey, can you let me in the building? I'm downstairs." He comes down, he opens the door, he's like, "Hey, man, canceled the game this morning." And I was like, "Oh, I guess I missed that." And I looked on my phone, and sure enough, there was a Discord message saying that the game was off. So we're just kind of staying there, and he was like, "Hey, you want to get a coffee?" So we went and got. Well, I had a drink, he got a coffee, and then we went back to his studio, or the studio he shares. But anyway, studio, and then we just started kind of talking gaming stuff, and we ended up gaming stuff for like 3 hours. And at some point, he's like, "Hey, you know what? We really should have recorded this. It would have been great to record because it would have been great." Now it was rambling, and it was a really fun conversation. I don't know if it would have, I don't know how it would have translated if we had been recording it. Maybe the flow wouldn't have been the same since you feel a sense of formality. I think when you start to record things that you maybe don't feel when you're just kind of shooting the breeze, so to speak. But it was really fun. We talked about a lot of stuff, and I posted about this little travail, or and folks were asking like, "Oh, what'd you guys talk about? Do you have bullet points or anything?" And I mentioned some stuff, but I mean, we really were like just talking about all kinds of stuff, But it was good. It was good. A lot of like OD&D, AD&D, all kinds of different classes, kind of some of the stuff that he runs in his game. Lots of chainmail talk, and just we went all over the place. It was really good, and I kind of wish that I almost wish like if there was a way to kind of set up a recorder so you kind of forget about it. So you think you could just have these kind of natural conversations and not be worrying about stuff, and then you could come back and either just post it, or if you feel the need to edit it. But it was good. It was a good time, and I am going to be we are going to record something. I think we're going to be on his channel this time, maybe just in a probably pretty soon, and we might do it live in person. So we'll see how that goes. Ian says they ran their first Black Hat game this week. Nice, Ian. How did the game go? Frederick says DM Angelo's game almost canceled last night. Then a fourth player showed up. Yeah, I mean, it was funny. It was interesting with Daniels. He says that normally his games that he'll roll pretty much with whatever, but there were just you just get those circumstances. Like I think I've played in 2 games and we've missed 2, including yesterday, because the other one we missed was when what was it? Was that it was one that I was gonna miss last. It was it last week's game? I forget which game it was, but I was going to miss it because it was going to be, it was the last week's game. I was going to miss it because I was going to be out of town, but then it was one of those horrible air days, from the forest fires. So that one got canceled. And he told me, he says, I guess my luck is just bad because normally he'll play pretty much with anything, but just, circumstances are what they are. But it ended up being a great time. So I don't, the gaming would have been fun, but this was probably in some ways more fun, different fun. Here's what Homebrew says of the mind that not everything needs to be content. It's okay to keep some things for ourselves. Yeah, totally. And yeah, we definitely talked about some stuff that I wouldn't have wanted just thrown out there, but I also thought there was some good stuff too. And I don't mind sharing a lot of that things because I think people would have found it just a good talk, which people seem to enjoy, I guess. My life should be like the Truman Show. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what kind of bizarro Truman Show I would have. Let's get some stuff going here. Let's get going. How's everybody's week been? Hopefully it's been good. Oh, Ian on his Black Hat game said they're running against the Call of the Reptile Gods, didn't get any combat, left on an encounter cliffhanger. So, Ian, you're not doing 1-to-1 time, so that when you play next week, it's everyone will have been there twiddling their thumbs at this encounter. The one side would have gone away to get food, you know. Cool. It sounds good. I'm always I always really like as much as it's fun to have combat. I think sometimes the best sessions, the most memorable sessions, are either the ones that have maybe just one kind of really intense fight or just no fights at all, just people acting and reacting. Here's what Homer says: they have yet to play the Black Hack, though they're considering using the Space Hack for a solo romp through the stars. Man, there are so many hacks. I'd not even heard of the Space Hack. Is the Space Hack more Star Wars or Star Trek? I'm going to guess it's more Star Wars. Star Trek doesn't seem to, I guess in terms of sword and sorcery stuff, right? Star Wars with its, with through Flash Gordon and then its various influences is definitely more akin to sword and sorcery stuff than Star Trek. Yeah. And when the players all leave, the cult just kidnaps the characters and then walks away. That'd be good. Just we're gone. Okay, let's see. Some of the forums I did pick out some things. Is there anything going on Mastodon I can pick? Well, let me go through what I've got, and then we can come back and try to drag some stuff. Okay, there's the Lemmy. All right, so this one is called. This is posted to the moondoggospel.blogspot.com. Space opera. Okay, Homer says, here's what Homer says, space opera. That makes sense. This is posted to Moondog Gospel, all one word, MONDOGGOSPL.blogspot.com. It's called Domain Level Play, Reasons for Adventuring and Crack Cocaine. I haven't, obviously, with all these, I have not pre-read them. So if it goes horribly awry, I apologize in advance. Let me zoom in here. Excuse me. Okay. Roughly 1 in 4 PCs die in the campaigns I run. I am a kind DM, however, so to save the players the emotional trauma of losing their beloved PC, I just have everyone who rolls a 1 on a D4 rip up their sheet and make a new one. Of course, I don't actually do that, but the 1 in 4 death rate is actually accurate and not just for adventurers. The same mortality rate applied to crack dealers in 90s Chicago. This might lead you to think that this line of work would be unpopular and the few in this profession would be compensated highly. Surprisingly, that was not the case. Selling crack was actually so popular that there were more dealers than there were street corners for them to stand on. 25,000 people were betting their lives on this career, despite most of them earning just $3.30 an hour. You might be wondering then, why was crack dealing so popular? Well, for the same reason that a pretty Wisconsin farm girl moves to Hollywood. For the same reason that a high school quarterback wakes up at 5 a.m. to lift weights, explains Freakonomics. They all want to succeed in an extremely competitive field in which, if you reach the top, you are paid a fortune. Being the leader of a local gang was a highly paid and very lucrative position to kids growing up in these neighborhoods. And with few other options for upward social mobility, it seemed like their only way to make it big. Just as drug dealing is a much worse profession than it seems on TV, adventuring isn't all slaying dragons and wooing maidens. Adventurers face similarly poor working conditions. The high mortality rate needs no explanation, but some readers might be surprised at the idea that adventurers make a relatively poor wage. If you're one of those readers, consider a 500 gold piece haul from a dungeon, for example. If you divide that amongst 5 surviving PCs, each one doesn't even have enough to live comfortably for a year by D&D 5th edition rules. How many of your PCs have ever actually accumulated enough treasure to retire? How can I use this in my game? Common questions such as, why did my character become an adventurer, and why is the Lord sending us to do this quest rather than sending his soldiers, require good answers to keep the setting believable and to keep players and DM alike immersed. Basing your campaign on the structure of how a gang works gives you an easy answer to these questions. In this comparison, the peasants are the masses of people with no opportunities for social mobility. They are stuck in this position unless they risk their life. The Lord has dangerous dungeons strewn across his land with ancient treasures he wants to get his hands on, and he offers his peasants the chance to go get it for him. Many will not return, and many will give up. Just as many a failed actor becomes a waiter, the one-armed adventurer becomes a quest giver. A few of these peasants, though, will return with their skin and get to keep some of the treasure they find. And those who are able to return multiple times might get to become a knight or a court wizard. Having already had experience with domain level play since level 1, they'll have a good understanding of how domains work should they rule their own one later. All we're really doing here is basing our characters' motivations off the material conditions of our world. Doing this by hand can be quite complex, so instead we're copying a real-life situation. We continue on this track to answer common world-building questions, including who owns this land and what does the Lord want? Thankfully, Freakonomics can give an interesting answer to these questions too, with a story of a gang war. After several peaceful years, a turf war started with a neighboring gang. Drive-by shootings became a common occurrence. Dealers wanted to be paid extra for the added risk of getting shot, and customers were scared to come out to buy. So why did their leader start this war? As it turns out, he didn't. His dealer started the war against his will. The leader wanted to keep the peace and keep business flowing, while his underlings wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted a chance to prove what they're capable of. In a similar way, the Lord wants peasants to keep peacefully doing his bidding, but they might stand to earn more treasure going into nearby lands of a human clan or a knoll tribe and seeing what treasure they can steal from there. Setting your players free in a world like this, where others are also out for the same treasure they are, will quickly get them thinking just like a gang dealer in an entrepreneurial way. They'll devise clever plans to get an edge over the competition, play with factions like their toys, and rise to the top of the food chain or die trying. All right, well, that's a good article. Frederick mentions that there was an article similar about economics of venture in Space Gamer magazine ages ago, and that the chance of your character coming ahead are really slim. I mean, yeah, it's true for any really dangerous or competitive endeavor, right? I mean, you think about pro sports, even adding everything together in terms of percentage of the population, getting to the level of playing anything for pro sports, even if you're at the end of the bench and never get to actually play, but you're on the team, is incredibly slim. Chances are you're not going to make it. So why do you keep trying? Because there is that if the chances may be super slim, but there's a chance. So maybe you take it and see if you can, as I say, rise to the top. I mean, it's a good article. It's interesting. It seems to be written from the 5th edition perspective. And the only reason I mean, when he mentions 5th edition, but the reason I was thinking is because of the pattern here is that someone's sending you on quests. Whereas normally in my kind of games, I tend to let the players be choosing it. So the players are already free agents in a sense. They're already trying to start their own gang as opposed to starting on the bottom of some Lord's gang. And often they'll want to join some Lord's gang because of all the obvious advantages that you have being part of a bigger organization, having bases, having power bases, obviously access to resources and all that stuff. It's much simpler if you can hitch your wagon up to someone who already has that power as opposed to building it up from yourself. I think the things still apply. I mean, I think the other interesting thing is maybe this seems more novel coming from a 5th edition idea where you have quest givers and you have the stuff. Whereas I think that a lot of this is kind of like, well, yeah, in its sort of OSR kind of old school way, it's kind of like, of course here. This is all what you're trying to do. I mean, that's the game. Get rich or die trying. That's it. So this is interesting. Hopefully, I think this is good in the sense as an article, in the sense that I would hope that maybe it will shine some lights on things. But the other thing is I guess is just to flip it over is from a 5th edition perspective. That's not really what people are playing for anymore. Like they don't want to just be out getting treasure for the Lord. That the plot lines or whatever you're expected to be doing as a hero is supposed to be a little more high-minded than that, right? If you think of, I don't know, Critical Role or whatever, they're not out just to kind of get loot. They have purposes and they have things they want to do and rescue their backstory, people from their backstory who take a prisoner or solve some mystery or save the world. And this is something a lot more kind of or a lot less romantic, I guess, from that standpoint. But a good article. I think it certainly does it's certainly a nice counterpoint to the concept that why would anyone adventure, or why there should almost be no one would adventure. And that's not, and I think this points to that why that's not true. Is that even though, yeah, the odds are you're going to die, whatever, if you're a peasant and you look at your lot in life, or you're a serf and it's even worse, and you're thinking like, there's no way out. Well, this might kill me, but I'm kind of hate my existence right now. So I'll take that shot. And so you end up doing it. Oh, let's see. Here's our homebrew says the local lord says, congratulations. I've decided to give you the chance to die horribly for me. Yes, exactly. Exactly. All right. That was Moondog Gospel. Thanks for whoever shared that. I think this was shared to, I want to say someone posted it. Who posted it? somewhere in here. Thanks to Copacetic on the Lemmy for posting that one. Which one was this? This one. Oh yeah, I did look at this. This is I got this. I don't know if I want to read this one. It's a little bit long. Two, it's kind of a review of Swords and Wizardry, and I'd rather just look at it myself than read the review. But it's called Single Saves and Sorcery. It seems like it's pretty in depth. So if you're interested in that, this is on the Labyrinth Lesbian Substack. You can check that out. And there's a link to it in the Lemmy. Hey, Brian Smith, you didn't miss too much. Oh, there's another OSR on lemmy.world. So I'm on lem.ee or e. There's another one if you're interested in finding more Lemmy instances about old school gaming. This one is kind of a follow-up. If you remember last week, we looked at the Punnett squares for social encounters, and then that article listed to or linked to a couple of other articles also using Punnett squares. And this is one of them. This might be the one that kind of started it off. This is from the iCast Light blog at iCastlight, all one word, LIGHT, .blogspot.com. I will do some zooming. Reddit is being bombarded with noobs asking how to play again. Well, I'm trying to stay away from Reddit. The only time I've gone on Reddit since the blackout was I have a few people who my only form of contact with them is they have messaged me on Reddit. So I'm trying to. So I had to message back and forth with somebody, and then the other thing I did was I posted on the here go see the Lemmy community. I noticed there's been more shenanigans. So some communities were changing their subreddits to not safe for work as a little bit of a form of protest, but Reddit is shutting that down proper. I don't want to get sidetracked on Reddit again. But here's the thing, Reddit moderators. It's clear you don't own your communities, because I see that what Reddit is doing now is they're holding moderators, the communities hostage to push around the moderators. And someone says there's one of them which was about essentially like a military veterans subreddit, which apparently like helping folks coming back, coming out of military service with all kinds of stuff, which is really important work. And they were saying that, hey, look, we got to do these things because our community, it puts our community potentially at risk, and it's too important to put at risk. So I'm just gonna have to do what Reddit wants me to do because of that. I just kind of feel like, look, get out. The community is not yours. They're going to do something else. They're going to do something else. They're going to do something else. I don't know. Put a post up and pin it to the top saying, go here, go create a K-Bin or a Lemmy or some other kind of form, discourse, whatever, and just move, because you don't own that community. And this should be your wake-up call to, I need to get this community out of here as much as I can, because you don't know what Reddit's going to do. And this thing is going to keep going. Every time they do something crappy, they're going to hold your community against you, and you're going to go, oh, the community's too important. You just gotta hit the ripcord, man. Hit the ripcord. Anyway, email chain, yeah, just add some messaging. Go to, do it, and you're gonna you'll lose some community. Yes, some things will be lost, but if you don't get out now, when are you gonna get out? I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's not gonna be a great time to get out. I mean, the great time to get out would have been of never getting in, but you're in. You got to get out. And in these excuses like, well, it's important, so I can't get out. It's like, well, what are you gonna do when they do something even worse? You gotta do it. And I know a lot of communities look at themselves that way. It's too important, or probably also like, this is my own sole point of importance, and if I don't have this community, then I don't have anything. But it's not yours, it's Reddit's, and they're gonna keep taking it away from you, and they're gonna keep doing worse and worse things. So you've seen the true face. So the false Hydra has shown its face, and now it's time to get out. Yeah, the thing is with new people. So the friends were talking about how new people are going on to, I'm guessing, the OSR subreddit or somewhere, and asking all these questions. If you're a new person, I don't know, I would find it almost impossible that a new player would end up on the stream. But if you are a new player, let me look at you here before I get back to this. Come with a specific question. Actually, new GM or new player. There's a slightly better chance that a new GM might end up here than a new player. But either way, ask specific questions. Don't come in and just say, well, how do I play the game? Whatever. Like, those are so basic, so open-ended. Come with specific questions. Do a little bit of work yourself. Do some searching on the internet. Heck, it's easier and easier. And one thing that, they're not always perfect, and they're very often very imperfect. But now you have things like search engines incorporating Chat GPT type stuff where you can literally ask them human formatted questions and they'll try to answer you. And sometimes the answers might not be right or legible, but at least you can get a head start, get information, use the search, use search engines, use the searches inside whatever form you are, get some information, get some context, and then ask a question. I want to help new GMs. I want to help new players, but it's really hard when someone's just like, well, tell me about what is the game? You can go to YouTube and watch a ton of videos from all kinds of people on different, how to play the game. You can find that information yourself. Presuming you're not a toddler, my 9-year-old daughter could do it. Go on to YouTube and find a video, find an article, right? Information's there. So just do a little homework. And I think when you do that, when you show you've done that, then people will spend more effort to help you out, because it feels really low effort when someone just comes in and just asks a very basic general question and just expects someone else to do a bunch of homework for them. I mean, maybe they just think we have all this stuff on our top of mind all the time, and sure, we'll just, but no, it's like, I'm probably gonna have to go and think about it. I'm going to spend 10 minutes writing it out, all the stuff. It's like, you're going to taking advantage of that. Do some work yourself and say, like, hey, even if you don't get it, say, like, look, I looked over here, I read this and read that, and I really couldn't grok it. So could somebody else break some things down for me? Like, all this stuff showing that you've done some effort will make people feel better about giving you back effort. But it feels really bad when it feels like you're just taking and you're not really doing any work yourself. All right, there's my PSA, TED Talk, whatever. So this is icastlight.blogspot.com. This is called Grendel Mendel using Punnett squares for monster design. Here we go. Where's my, I guess I don't need, did I zoom in? Am I zoomed in? I think I am already, right? Yeah, I am. Okay. Let me know if I think that's good. Once again, I'm surprised by what catches fire on Twitter and what doesn't. The most recent example is a response I posted to Luke Gearing and Sean McCoy's tweets about simple monster design. I agree with both in that it shouldn't be too complicated, but you do need some variation. To achieve that, I use a sort of Punnett square based on melee or range, multiplied, or melee, range, damage, or special. I created this method when trying to figure out how to further differentiate all the various factions in Forbidden Caverns of Archaea. The Mega Dungeon module has several factions that players can interact with, and I wanted to give them both a distinctive feel and strategic/tactical pros and cons. That way, PCs can make informed decisions based on their own party compositions of who to interact with and tactics to use. Here are the basic Punnett squares outline. Here is the basic Punnett squares outline, and below I will explain 1, how I envision each quadrant, and 2, how this tool can be scaled to a small force, a singular boss monster, or a whole dungeon level, and 3, provide some examples. So we have 4 squares, right? So you basically have 2 columns and 2 rows. 1 column's damage, the other column's special, 1 row is melee, the other column's range. So you end up with melee damage, melee special, range damage, range special. Are we all following so far? So first, characteristics of each quadrant. Melee times damage, or melee and damage. Enemies are characterized by how much damage they inflict and the melee weapons they use to do it. Sword, axe, mace, or claws. The rank and file of an army or faction, the very basic unit. Generally, I keep the damage to whatever weapon you use to define the melee class. If in your game weapons have different qualities, such as in Wolves Upon the Coast, all the better. This might also be a place to could be a place to add an additional attack. Melee and special. For the exercise, I try to keep the damage at 1d6 level, but I try to think of either 1, some unique way to deliver damage, 2, some unique effect on a successful melee hit in addition to the damage, which is why it's kept low, or 3rd, some spell-like effect that changes things while in melee. This quadrant might also include attack animals the melee damage units might use. Now, since you are often running monsters in aggregate, I'd stick to just 1 additional effect at the most 2. This is because too many effects take up DM brain space. Examples. Too quick. Creatures Creature always attacks before the PCs. Charge. Creatures move in a straight line. Anyone in between. In a straight line, anyone between. Oh, I see. Save versus paralysis or take 1d6. Heavy hands. On a successful hit, save versus paralysis or the PC is knocked prone. Duelist. On a damage roll of 1, save versus paralysis or the PC has weapon knocked from hand. They may choose their shield. Grisly Visage. Creature has a 5-foot aura of fear. Mirrored image. Hard to focus on the true creature. First X amount number of attacks, automatically miss. Trog Stench. Foul stench makes it hard to hit. Spiky. Take 1 damage per round engaged in melee with the creature. Pretty classic. And then finally, Web. Creature entangle on a successful melee. Also pretty classic. Range and damage. Another basic rank and file unit armed with missile weapons. I also include reach weapons in this quadrant like the ever-useful spear. Other mundane sources of missile fire could be the old oil and torch or flaming arrows. Or it could be melee damage units that first engage with 1 or 2 javelins before pulling out swords. For a touch more flavor, I might also just put very basic magic users here with magic missile-like attacks or ranged elemental damage. And this is a swig of water for the working man. And hey, Krister, I'll catch up on the chat in a minute. Let me just get through this. I'm going to let me get through the end of this part and then the next part. Oh, let's see, where was I? For a touch more flavor, I might just put very basic magic users here with magic missile-like attacks or ranged elemental damage. It could also be interesting reach weapons like a giant scorpion tail whip. For the armor of these units, I drop it 1 or 2 points below the melee damage units and also give them a 1d4 melee weapon of last resort. However, if you want to express that what the players are facing is a well-run military machine, these might just convert into melee damage units once the distance is closed. And then finally, range with special, or range and special. When filling out this quadrant, I often don't even think about damage at all, but I don't exclude it. I'm often trying to come up with fun, interesting, and thematic area effects, mundane or magical, and creatures with more spell-like effects that give boons and or banes to friends and foes alike. Okay, before I get to examples, let's see what's going on. Seems like a lot of stuff that I missed, maybe. Whoa, boy, there's a lot of stuff I missed. Oh, people are talking Adventures League and stuff? Okay. All right. I don't know what I missed, but Frederick says sugar is money. Oh, I see. The candy stores. Okay. I think you take that in many different ways. All right. So here's some examples of this system. I'd like to see them in the Punnett squares, but they're not. So examples these are examples of ranged specials, I guess. Fetid Air. A creature carries a sensor that casts fog or darkness. A standard bearer. A unit carries a banner that carries a magical effect or boosts morale. Dance of the Dead. A creature can raise any dead on the battlefield or beats a drum that causes the dead to rise on a 5 or 6 every round, or is that 5 out of 6 every round? Anti-Magic Eye. A creature has a beholder's central eye on a stick directed towards magic users. That's a kind of interesting one. Spider Climb Archers. Creatures can climb walls, ceiling, and fire from there. Shadow Hands. The unit produces large but clumsy hands from the corner shadows to grab. I need another drink. Okay. Scaling for different situations. At a basic level, I created this tool to create small skirmish-sized bands to take on 4 to 6 PCs plus some hirelings. Here is a square that I completed for the Kobold faction in Archaea. Mainly, I thought they might employ insects in the area and tried to do some effects around poison. The black shapes are just little reminders about the relative ratio of the units to each other using D6s and D4s. So here's the example we have of kobolds. Their melee damage are pickaxes and large carapace shields. Their special is they have giant scorpion wranglers. And then the range damage units are giant scorpion tails on a pole. And the range special units are insect jar slingers, shatters with an area of effect. And there's a 1 in 4 chance, I guess, that you would drop your weapon to remove stinging bugs. So this is cool. It's got the 6s and 4s, I guess. I know they said it's relative ratio, so I guess there's for every 6. I know it doesn't really matter, but I guess for every 6, that means there's 4, or are they rolling dice? I'm not sure, but it's cool. Hey, Tunka Todd, long time no see. Team Todd representing. And I guess maybe he's going to explain it. So But the above could also be put together to represent a single monster with multiple attack types. While it might seem like a lot of actions, it's not when you look at even an average first level party of PCs in aggregate. First level BX D&D party, fighter, cleric, wizard, thief, is a 4 HD creature that gets about 3 attacks per round, maybe 2 spells, and on the opportunity to have 1 attack deal 2 times their d6 damage. Look at our kobold block above. We could turn it into some sort of scorpion-like avatar of a kobold god. Oh, and there we got a screen cap from what is that movie? That is a Clash of the Titans. So the single opponent's character buys by melee. Their melee damage is D10, but maybe the front half is better armored, has AC +2. Their melee special is saying that since their damage is already strong, how about if hit can crush for 1d6 damage per round, strength to escape claw. Their range damage is their stinging tail, and their range special is, again, since we have 3 attacks, how about can throw a PC hit with a claw 15 feet, 1d6 damage to hit another solid object, or they can summon a swarm. And then there's additional link, which linking to Matt Colville's action-oriented monsters. I kind of have I don't want to say love-hate. I kind of dislike action-oriented monsters somewhat. We also scale in the opposite direction and use the 4 quadrants to represent a whole level of a dungeon, or maybe as a way to seed 4 ideas that can be iterated around to fill out a 6 or 8 entry encounter table. We might use this method as opposed to just listing some monsters. The main benefit is that it helps us remember to infuse some variety into our monsters, and this doesn't have to be so combat oriented. Our special categories could be monsters that steal items, spoil rations, or wield magical effects that permeate the dungeon. The end result is hopefully a list of monsters that reinforce the aesthetics of the dungeon, but are heterogeneous enough that a heterogeneous PC party can make use of a lot of its members in various encounters. And then there's additional links to a post about creating a new unique monsters. Maybe I'll open that in a new tab. And then pairs well with objectives. All right. And then finally, we have some examples. I'm just going to read the Punnett square. So if it's for skeletons, they have melee damage. They're just these calcified warriors. Their special melee is their elven lineage that gives them, it says they have air movement through bones, creates a stupor. Opponents in melee get -1 initiative. Their range damage is skull chuckers, where they throw heads. I guess maybe their own heads, maybe someone else's heads. And then finally, their range special is a dead drummer. Stays away from battle, but music raises the dead in turns equal to HD. This one I like because it really is. It speaks to, what's the word I'm thinking of? So one of the issues that folks run into is you are running a dungeon and you decided it's some kind of necropolis. So you're filling it with undead, and probably because of the band of levels you want to be suitable for, you're not using all the undead. You're using some subset. Maybe you're doing skeletons, zombies, and then some ghouls in there. But so you find out, so you have these, skeletons, zombies, and ghouls, but now that you have these 3, what happens is you're in the dungeon, you're like, I've got 50 odd rooms and all this stuff, and I'm coming up with a whole bunch of skeletons, zombies, and ghouls. This is going to be boring. There's no variety within there because, hey, look, the monster manual for skeletons just has 1 skeleton entry, 1 zombie entry, 1 ghoul entry. And there's things you can do even with that, like mixing thing up, having some skeletons and some zombies, have some zombies and some ghouls, have some skeletons and some ghouls, right? Some of all 3. That's fine too, but you still might end up with the fact that they're going to be doing lots of these things, and even putting those things all together that you're looking at, well, they all kind of do the same thing. The zombies, the skeletons, and to a lesser extent, the ghouls are all, or at least in terms of relative to each other, like all the skeletons are going to act the same way, all the zombies are going to act the same way, and all the ghouls are essentially going to act the same way, that kind of thing. Using this kind of system, now you can come up with, here's my skeleton, but now you have just within these skeletons a bunch of different things. Now, maybe all skeletons do this, or maybe some of them do this, some of them don't. So maybe you have some that are just calcified warriors. That's all they do. Maybe you have some that are elven skeletons that have this weird air thing, or they've been ritually carved so that air blows through and makes weird whistling noises if you don't like the elven lineage thing, but whatever. You have some that throw their own heads around and start chattering at you. And then you can have these drummers, and then maybe you can have one that might do all of those things, some that might just do 2 of these things. Right? So now when you're rolling up some skeletons, so then you can look at this and say, well, within those skeletons, there's some like this, some like that. And then I guess you could use these ratios, or maybe you could roll dice and say it's going to be 6 of these, 4 of those, something of that nature. So I like that. I like that a lot. I'm wondering if the thing is, I'm wondering is that for myself, as I'm thinking, do I like these particular things? Like, is it, so on the one hand, from a combat standpoint, this is good, right? Because you're thinking about what can they do close up that's just damaging, and what they can do close up that's special. What can they do ranged that's damaging? What can they do ranged that's special? But this is all combat oriented, and I'm wondering if there's some different things we could do that maybe keep some of that, but then are also like it doesn't have to be. We're thinking maybe outside of combat a bit. I'm not sure. I have to think about it, but it's an interesting setup. Oh my gosh, goblins riding blink dogs. What did I miss? Hold on, I missed some stuff in the chat here. What is going on? Let's see. Ian. Well, here's what Homer said. They didn't realize how stress-free jamming could be until they started playing OSR games. Yes, it is. It's a lot. Yes, I would agree with you. And I think that's the kind of the secret sauce that I think that doesn't get. A lot of folks evangelize OSR play in different ways, but we don't tend to evangelize that aspect of it, which I think would be a big draw for GMs. It's just, hey, it's a lot easier prep and a lot less, a lot of responsibilities are kind of lifted off of you, and it's easier. Ian said they're in the Monsters Should Do Cool-ish camp. I mean, I think I don't think it's anything. I think that's a big camp. I don't know that is there anyone out there saying monsters should not do cool stuff? I think the one thing that I'm on, so here's the one thing, like with action-oriented monsters and with some of these things, what I don't like are the things that are clearly like meta tools. So for instance, when one of the examples in this article was the monster always goes first. I don't like it. Give it a bonus. It's fast, so it's got a plus whatever bonus to its initiative. Don't say it always goes first, because to me it's kind of a cheat. Or I think Matt Colville's one that he had was like if the Goblin King gets to round 2, then he does something, yells, "Come on, get over here," and then goblins appear. And it seems to me that it's cheap. Because I would know as a player, if we worked some angle or we did something like, okay, let's block the doors and let's do it. And then we got this guy trapped finally. We got him cornered, and then he's like, get over here. And goblins just emerge. I'd just be like, well, what did I do that stuff for? Like, I don't want this kind of meta thing, almost like video gamey. Like when you're playing a monster, you've done really well, but you know that like, well, it's going to go into a new phase, and everything we've done is kind of just going to get blinked out of existence because now it's in a new phase. And I don't like that. I want it to feel like you're there. And if he's yelling, get over here, and you block the doors, then you should hear the sounds of goblins banging on the doors. Now, maybe they can break down the doors. It'll take them time, whatever. It shouldn't just be like goblins appear from some goblin pocket dimension because in my action-oriented monster, this is his new power, or that the monster goes first. Why? It just does. Nah, I'm not a big fan of that element of it. I like the idea of giving monsters cool stuff, but I want it to be in the flow of the game, like everything else, like everybody else, or that it might have abilities the players don't have, but I'm not just giving it a pass on like, well, you don't have to roll initiative. You're just always going to go first. Like, that's weak. That's weak. Right. And then it means that like if the players were, because here's the thing with that, like the monster always goes first. So the players, they came up with some amazing plan and they're going to do all this stuff, and they're going to have casting haste and all these things and whatever so that the fighter could go first and do this cool thing. And they're like, the monster goes first. After all that, it goes first. I'd just be like, I would be like, there better be a reason. And the reason's got to be, if I'm the player, I'm going, that is some bull. And there better be some reason. Like, was this guy got some kind of ring of like, I always go first? And it's like, nah, it's just in my Punnett Square where he always goes first. I'd be like, man, that's weak. So, if you're going to put like monster always goes first, you better have, I'm thinking to me, I always want to be like, I better have some really in-game world reason why this thing has some overriding I go first in initiative kind of juice. And it should be more not, and it should not just consist of a note to myself saying, oh yeah, I've decided in my infinite wisdom that this thing goes first. It better be better than that. Let's see. It's going back. Ian says, I think the MCDM folks would agree with you, and goblins would probably start banging on the barricaded doors. I mean, that's fine. I mean, yeah, look, I mean, yes, I'm only taking it at face value. I would hope that Matt Colville in his game, that the goblins would need some kind of way of entry. But my same thing, but I would have the same issue. So, like, I guess, like, how far does it go, right? So what does that power give the monster? If I'm going to write it on the character sheet, in round 2, the Goblin King can yell, help me, and goblins arrive. At what point, what is the interaction between that and the game state? So if the party had entered the dungeon, if the party entered the Goblin's King lair and systematically went room to room and exterminated every living goblin that they found, went around all the rooms, came to the Goblin King's room last, having cleared out and verified through magic and everything else that there's one goblin left, and it's the Goblin King. Does that at that point would they turn off that power? Like even if I would rather that as I'm writing it, just as a mechanic, that it would err on the side of making sure that it's clear to the GM that whatever that it's not an auto. Like he'll call for help, and then maybe say he can call for help, and then I would just run that in the game. Like if there's some chance there's some goblins nearby, they'll come, but not that goblins just kind of come out of thin air, which is how it kind of reads. And then you're relying. I don't want to rely on people having to make those kinds of choices, I guess, if I'm going to write down that kind of mechanic. But I would hope that someone like him would certainly look at it and try to put it in context. Here's a homebrew says there are players, particularly of modern editions, that think creatures shouldn't have the same abilities as PCs. Like creatures shouldn't be able to crit. Creatures shouldn't be able to crit. Yeah, and I mean I'm not actually totally against that because creatures get abilities that players don't get. So where you decide to draw the line between giving creatures, where the parity should be, is kind of I don't know. It's a very soft line. It's kind of, I don't necessarily, the problem I have is when that comes up with like, it's just all in the player's favor. Like if you want to make a reason, like saying monsters shouldn't crit because they're more likely to, like the players are going to have a lot more chances to crit than monsters, but that, it's not like, I understand the point of, hey, like a monster shouldn't necessarily have just, if you said to me, listen, the monster's hanging out and doing things, but when the players run into it, it always has its full complement of everything. And you could make an argument that, well, that's not fair because the players don't. And are we to believe that this guy never had to cast a spell until we showed up? Like maybe not. I don't know. Like, I don't know that I buy the argument, but you can make it. Something like a crit, I think, is different. But, like I said, ultimately, they're asymmetrical already. So where you want to draw the line, but with that asymmetry, it's kind of going to be up to you. I mean, the cool thing about older editions, a lot of it, there was no asymmetry at all. I mean, it's only when you got to really kind of fantastical creatures, right? A lot of creatures, well, I guess not fantastic creatures, like all the humanoids were essentially very similar, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. Let's see. Brian Smith says, yeah, I think they should be drawn to the call, not summoned from a pocket dimension, just in my example, which would be fun. They suddenly start banging on the door. Yeah, that would be fun. But it's just one of those things that the way it's written, like it's asking me to have to make a decision between when I feel like this power fires and when it doesn't. And I just don't need that mechanized. Like, then why am I mechanizing it at all? I could just have the guy call for help. Like, that's kind of one thing. Like, as soon as you put it as like, this is a power, you're kind of giving it some extra juice that it doesn't need, right? And then I can see the argument from GMs going, it's like, well, the Goblin King, this is one of his abilities. And he has this ability. I mean, much like a player would make the argument, right? I only have so many abilities, so you should make this ability count. Like the GM might be going, well, listen, the Goblin King's only got 3 abilities. This is one of them. So you're saying that in all these circumstances, that ability is pointless. I'm not going to do that, right? I want it to be able to use all its abilities and blah, 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 right? So I think it just ends up creating issues. Nosorian says, hey, Nosorian says, I get what you mean. It's like cheating because it removes the consequences of player choices. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Let's see. Oh, and so Nosorian, I think responding to the stuff about critting, says As they remember it, at first it was because players are exposed to many attacks along their career and criticals hurt the most, but I think it's most fun for them to crit. Yeah, there's nothing like that tension of something critting. Something critting you. Okay, so here's another one with some swine. It's another example. Finally, before you put this one to bed, these, I guess they're swine folk, the kind of old school, I guess really old school orcs, except they're more swiney than old school orcs. Anyway, their melee damage is they have a hook and the leather and a shield. Their melee special, that's their melee damage. Melee special, they have 2 attacks. They can entangle for 0 damage on a successful odd number to hit. That's kind of complicated. Basically, they can, instead of doing damage, they can try to entangle you. Their range damage, they have a javelin. And their range specials, they have vomit bile that they can, I guess, goo in some kind of cone. But I don't know. Maybe that's some other critter that they're keeping with them. I don't know. But that's gross. Cool. Well, I like the idea. I feel like there's definitely some stuff there I could use. I don't know that I'd want to do it in this way. But it's cool. What else have we got? Where am I doing on time? 48 minutes. All right, cool. This is the one I posted. Let me see. There was one other Punnett Square article. Let me do this one first. We'll go to this one first, and then we'll go. There was one other Punnett Square. We'll save that one. Zoom in here. Is that big enough? Oh my gosh, this is old. Well, it's new to me, so there you go. This is from the Dungeon of Signs blog at Dungeon of Signs, all one word, blogspot.com from October 25th, 2016. All right, an oldie, but hopefully a goodie. This is titled Monster Design and Necessity. So D&D 5e is about to put out a new monster manual, Volo's Guide to Monsters. It might be awful, and it might be really cool. It sounds like they are focusing more on unreliable narrators and ecology to tell a lot more detail about the monsters in the book, rather than just provide a cacophony of statistics. Now, I fear Volo's Guide will not amuse me, though it is definitely taking cues from Patrick Stewart and Scrap Princess's Fire on the Velvet Horizon, but only because I don't think Elminster-flavored text can be anything but dreadful. Still, there are things to be said about monster design, and I agree with Mike Merles and 5th edition when they want to focus on the intangibles of their monster, their behaviors, ecology, hooks related to them, and similar inspirational information for the GM up to a point. Monsters are iconic and essential theme to tabletop fantasy, and doing them well goes a long way towards doing a game well. The issue is what's really useful and necessary in a monster design, especially for one published as a supplement. For this, I think to the games I've played recently and what makes encounters in them good. I'm playing in Ben of Mazarin's Gardens Dreamlands game a bit, and I've noticed that one of the things I enjoy is that we've yet to encounter any monster from a book, at least as far as description and characterization goes. To me, this is a mark of a good campaign and good world building. Using unique monsters means, among other things, that the GM needs to describe them and that the players need to think about them as more than a reference to a monster manual. One of my major complaints about published modules, and even the 5th edition monster manual, is a lack of description for monsters beyond dull formalities. There is a balance in designing pre-made monsters somewhere between several pages of likely dull with Elminster invoked, of genre fiction, the Volo's Guide promises, and the terse statistics-based descriptions found in the Little Brown Books. I'm not sure where exactly it lies. Certainly, Fire on the Velvet Horizon is a pretty lyrical in its monster descriptions, but it's a fun read because its descriptions are full of evocative detail that gets a GM thinking about how to use the monsters described within. And of course, anything done well is better than the best thing done badly. Personally, however, I have little use for monster manuals, even good ones. For me, the aesthetics of monsters aren't hard to think up and design. And the most important element about an encounter is that it makes sense in the setting. I tend to run non-standard settings, and making monsters that fit those settings, tell stories about the setting, and generally provide a point for player interaction, wonder, and decision-making is often far easier than fitting monsters from other sources into non-standard settings. Let me just take a moment here to get a drink. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Managing unique monsters. Every monster in the Dreamlands is unique. Mole rat men, weird slime people, root kings, a multi-armed something with a big hungry mouth. This is wonderful. As a player, one must use one's own estimates of what looks dangerous, might be friendly, and what special attacks or defenses a creature might have. And making these tactical decisions, the player is engaging in thinking about the setting fiction rather than trying to remember what the statistics of a goblin or troll are in the latest monster manual, or what some other well-known fantasy beast might do. Now, Dreamlands isn't using Pathfinder or even 5th edition D&D, and designing monsters with statistics for basic D&D is not mechanically difficult, though thinking up interesting special abilities using very limited rule sets can be. However, it's far easier to simply reskin existing monsters and use their statistics, adding or subtracting special abilities and tricks as necessary, and one can manage this trick in almost any system. Moreover, reskinning and inventing monsters makes a GM notice something, that really there aren't that many stat lines or types of monsters that the players face. Okay, so I feel like he's getting kind of roundabout, but I have Volo's guide. I think it's been forever since I looked at it. It's kind of funny when you read these and it's like, this book's about to come out and I'm not sure I'm going to like it. And it's like, we're reading it from a place where I think Volo's is pretty well thought of, I think. And I don't know that I'd be curious if they have read Volo's after this, if they did find it as terrible as they were kind of thinking it was going to be. I mean, I do agree it's easier making unique monsters in older editions where it's very simple. Saying that it can be hard to make interesting abilities if your rule set's limited, I probably would disagree with that, because you just brew up what you need. If there's a certain effect that doesn't exist in BX and suddenly you need it, then you just make it up. And using, the closest thing you can find and riffing from there, and you can only borrow from other settings, etc. So I'm not sure I get that. Oh, this is difficult. Reskinning is a great trick. That should be one of the first tricks that I think a newer GM should use, is instead of going through the whole bits of finding and trying to create a monster from scratch, see if you can find a really close match for it, or as close as you can get in existing monsters. Change things, add, subtract a little bit, go from there. What's necessary for play? What makes foes distinctive is either their place in the game world, how the players can interact with them as NPCs, their descriptions, and sometimes unique abilities or tricks that make combat with them interesting. Take a look at the Little Brown books, which I believe contain the first tabletop monster manual, and which I've slowly been going through thinking about the monsters within. What notice is that the monsters described within are often very similar. For example, the level 1 table for random encounters on page 10 of Underworlds and Wilderness Adventures lists 8 possible encounters that are the weakest sort of random encounters. Referencing monsters and treasure and making some guesses for the monsters not specifically listed. Centipedes, spiders, and giant rats are small animals or insects with 1 hit point and AC 8. One discovers that first level parties will likely encounter a fair number of kobolds, goblins, skeletons, orcs, giant rats, centipedes, bandits, or spiders. One could break these into a few categories, even with some minor variation. And the breakdown is A, weak intelligent combatants, B, normal intelligent combatants, C, very weak animals, some maybe with a special attack in the form of poison. Monster strength is broken into 3 categories. The very weak, generally armor class 8 with 1 hit point each. The weak with half a hit die or 1 hit die minus 1, and armor class 6 or 7, averaging 2 hit points each under OD&D rules. And then normal, who are roughly equivalent to a badly equipped first level fighter with armor class 6 or 7 and 1 hit die, about 3 hit points on average. Let's assume that there are 2 other categories of monsters that appear when the dungeon gets more dangerous. Strong, 2 hit dice and or armor class 5 or 4, and very strong, 4 hit dice and armor class 3 or 2. Strong and very strong monsters are contemplated in the Little Brown books, as even on the first level of the dungeon, there is a chance of meeting lone, presumably, wraiths, ogres, and 6th level fighters. Obviously, as one goes deeper into the dungeon, these monsters increase in hit dice, but the progression makes a reasonable amount of sense. For a 4th level party, weak monsters would be 2 hit die creatures, while very strong enemies might have somewhere close to 16 hit dice. This is even reflected in Underworld and Wilderness Adventures, with subsequent levels of the dungeon encounter tables containing creatures in the ranges described. Behaviorally, the monsters on the level 1 table are also quite similar. All of the intelligent ones are going to act in a quasi-militaristic manner, but might be open to negotiation. Skeletons may fall in this category as well, though they might fit better with the animal attackers depending on how the undead are treated in the game world. All the rest will act with animal intelligence, and while perhaps less likely to attack initially, are also impossible to reason with. The Little Brown books are a bit unclear on the number of monsters appearing, seeming to disregard the monsters listed in Monster and Treasure for some indeterminate lower number based on party size in Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. Monster numbers, though, are a key element to monster design, as large numbers of attackers, even weak ones, are far more dangerous due to the number of actions they can take. This is more true in OD&D than in a lot of later editions, and it's interesting to note that the number of appearing descriptions in Monsters and Treasure tend to be high, with 30 to 300 often listed for humanoids. The last element of the mechanics of monster design is a foe's special abilities. While the list above shouldn't have any special abilities, I've included the poison ability for centipedes and spiders out of a desire to have at least some variation in the encounter list. Poison is a nasty special ability, but there are plenty of other tricks monsters can have. Breath weapons, spellcasting, weapon immunity, a lot of attacks, regeneration, etc. And offering the players chances to learn and adapt to these abilities, or guessing them prior to an encounter, is one way to make monster encounters more fun and interesting. Still, these four elements, type or strength, intelligence, number, and special abilities, can mechanically define pretty much all monsters. Below, I've created a set of tables for generating the mechanical elements of a random encounter table. One can roll a small die for generally less powerful monsters and roll separately in each column, though I'd suggest adding 1 point to the number roll for every class of monster stronger than very weak, i.e. 1d12 plus 4 for very strong monsters. I'd also limit these special ability rolls to no more than half the monsters in a random table, especially for lower level areas. And here he's got a table. Ian says Volos was great. Watsy gutted the best parts for their revision. Frederick says monster books are always good. Heroes and Homebrew said they like Volos. Monster books will always just be fun to look through regardless of the system. I would agree with all that. How does this work? Let's say I'm generating a new area, so I roll up 6 monster types. Using the above table and get the following, I use a 6 in 12 chance of monsters having a special ability with 3 abilities max for the table. So then they've got this D6 table, and then they get one that's weak, intelligent, pack, regeneration. I guess it's like a pack. I see then the number. So they get one that's weak, but it's intelligent, operates in a pack, has regeneration. One that's normal, animal, as in kind of a family unit, and has no special abilities. One that's a very weak animal that in a pair and has a death ray, so on and so forth. So here we have, based on as close an approximation as I can think of using standard monsters, goblins, but they regenerate, wolves, spitting cobras, fire beetles, rat swarms, kobolds. Without discussing how uninspiring this monster list is for a GM, I wouldn't say that. Regenerating goblins seems pretty nifty. It is also an eclectic mess at worst, and at best tells the players nothing about the location they are exploring. The monsters are all also likely well known. It's a spitting cobra, I cover my eyes, and we all throw oil bombs. And their tricks and dangers surmounted by rote memorization of the monster manual or other popular fantasy sources rather than through thinking about the description provided by the GM. Oh my gosh, this is longer than I thought. Hold on a sec. Once one accepts that monsters themselves aren't mechanically especially different, one may still adjust a stat line here and there, but instead falling into broad classes, it becomes far easier to use them organically and naturalistically, freed from the tyranny of a monster manual, where one has a selection of nearly identical humanoids or beasts of the weak type, goblins, etc., that need to be slotted into a location based on what might fit best. One can take the stat line of a goblin, maybe add a few touches for flair, and build a unique creature over the mechanical frame. Such a random encounter list, which might seem eclectic and thrown together, can work to support the feeling of the adventure and location, and might even inspire rooms and challenges. For example, I now know there's going to be creepy rodent shrines and rooms of rat-sized crypts built into the walls of the location. Now, let's say I think about the area with the above random encounter table and decide it's an ancient, crumbling mansion, the equivalent of a level 2 dungeon. The old place has been cursed by the Luis Rex, the rat deity of disease, poverty, and rot, as a temple for his cult and locus of his intrusion into the world. The monsters within are thus going to be manifestations and servants of this rat god, allowing me to take the mechanics above and create a flavorsome list of monsters. So he's taking his generic bits and flavoring them to match his location. So the ratkin are the weak, intelligent pack with regeneration. It's got dire rats, a rat king, rodent revenants, frenzied rats, and cult scions. So that, I mean, I think this is cool. I think it's it. I think it's definitely an interesting approach. I mean, I really like what he's doing. If you're ever thinking about how to a good method to look at monsters, and I think tying it to the level, it's saying that like with this, he's calling it, I guess he calls it the verminous manse. You say this is a level 2 dungeon, and then that gives you the things you need to scale up and down your table. Or you could say you're on level 3 of some, it's a dungeon where the levels are going to be kind of like a mega dungeon, then it can go that way. I think it's really cool. I think you could probably expand on these maybe a little bit, but I like it. Some of these are a little bit like, I'm not sure what differentiates a gang from a family from a pack other than numbers. I guess it's just a matter of size. Mob is the biggest. Sorry, swarm is the biggest. It's just really about how the size of it is. But yeah, that's cool. That is cool. You could almost just, I wonder what you could do. Yeah, it's I like it. Oh, I like it. I'll have to look at that. I'll have to look at that further. I'll have to look at that further. But yeah, that was a good piece. Good piece. It's old, but it is good. So that was from Dungeon of Science from way back in 2016. It seems like they kind of petered out in 2020. Well, it's always, and I know I've gone through these own things. Look at that. In 2012, he posted 212 posts, 134 in 2013, 89 in 2014, 32 in 2015, 14 in 2016. Then got a little bit of rejuvenation, brought it back up, 35 posts in 2017, and then 4 in 2018, and then a 2-year gap, and then 2 in 2020. So I wonder if they moved blogs. And by the way, blogs, if all this stuff with Reddit and Twitter now and all this stuff, man, I still think get off a Blogspot while you can. I know people love it and it's free, but if I feel like this, I'm surprised that Blogspot has trundled on as far as it has, man. Brian Smith asks, are these tables, quote unquote, table ready? Is it assumed that these tools for generating your own custom encounters? I always wonder if that's an ideal format for an evocative roll table you can use on the fly. Well, maybe. It's really going to, so Brian Smith, in terms of, so look at this random encounter table, right? I would say that for the most part, you could, right? You could. I would say no. I would think take the step like they've done and think about it beforehand and come up with I think ultimately the table ready one is this one that he's named and themed up for his location. That's really the table ready one. This one, these two are kind of part of your prep. So step 1 of the prep, or this is just a tool you just have, and then you start your prep here to give you kind of inspiration and whatnot, then finish your prep, you end up with that table. I probably would not, if I had a choice, use this intermediary table that says weak intelligent pack rate of generation. I mean, you probably could, right? If you're really good at your improv and you kind of know about and you've got an idea like, oh, they're in the swamp and I rolled up weak intelligent pack regeneration. What does that mean? Oh, okay. Maybe some kind of lizard men, or not quite lizard men, but maybe something else. You can riff with that. Like you could do it, but I would probably say if you can, to the extent that you can just come up with the actual things, I probably would do that. Ian responding to Here's a Homebrew says that Monster of the Multiverse combines content from Volos and Mordenkainen's and is their in-print monster expansion book going forward, but doesn't have all the cool lore content. Yeah, I like the lore. I'm curious, though, for the 5th edition folks on the lore, because I wonder if they use it. I mean, I have fun reading it, and I enjoy the lore, and I'd like to say I use it, but at the same time, it seems to me what a lot of people do, at least when I was reading the D&D subreddits, was they're looking to slot creatures in, looking for CR. What's the creature with CR like this? or maybe they have a desire to do that, something. But I see a lot of like, oh, I need a CR8 creature, or I want this in here because I want a CR whatever creature and this or that. And it becomes less about the lore. And it becomes more about, I need a thing to fill a certain spot. And it puts you in an interesting place, because there are a lot of creatures when you read the lore and stuff that kind of, you would almost dissuade you from using them in certain situations. But I don't know. Ian says there was some level of backlash in the 5e community. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't pretend to be really on top of the 5th edition zeitgeist, but I see a lot, or I was seeing a lot of just like, I need a creature to fill a spot. And then, that, because the other thing I would see is questions about creatures in a certain way. And to me, when I see those questions, is it's like these people are not reading the lore, or they're not realizing. And one that, I did a video on it ages ago, was like a succubus. And I think the whole impetus between me making that video, and I'd like to do more of those, but I haven't done any more, was folks looking at like, oh, I need to have the players are, I want them to fight a succubus. Like, what are they going to, what this or that? And they probably not that the party shouldn't want to fight a succubus, but a succubus shouldn't really want to fight the party, not like just want mono. Like, that's not the succubus thing. And if the lore and even looking at their abilities, look at it and go, well, this thing is probably trying to avoid fighting, or it's going to do the least amount of fighting it can do before it can run away and then try to work its mischief somewhere else. It's probably not going to go toe to toe. Like, that's just really not a succubus's thing. That's not its bag. But I think what happens is people end up looking for, oh, I need a creature that's CR whatever, and I like succubi, so I'm just going to throw it in there. And it's kind of like, well, does it make sense? No. Is it really made for that? No. So now you're looking around wondering, like, what can I do to make it, or how should I run it so that's this thing that it really isn't supposed to be, because it shouldn't do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's not a big deal. But this is cool. I'm going to have to ponder these. This one and the Peanut Scores one, I think, has some interesting ideas to it. This, I think, could be really useful. And it's kind of funny because not Frederick, Daniel spoke yesterday. He has that Grindhouse Referees book for Lamentations of Flame Princess. And it had some rules in there for creating monsters that are not in the core book. And it was kind of similar to this, where you basically take their hit dice and you kind of run some mathiness, do some different modifiers to their hit dice, and basically get everything about it. So you could kind of start with some hit dice, and you could pretty much from the hit dice get all the other stuff about it. And then I guess for special stuff, you could maybe roll some more dice. But it was kind of a neat system. Or Brian Smith says, or my party likes combat and I have a cool succubus mini. How do I make them fight it? Could be that too. Sometimes you have a mini, you have a fight and you need a mini, and sometimes you have a mini and so you need a fight. Well, all right, folks. I think we will call it here. These are some good articles. Another rabbit hole successfully delved. If you can give a thumbs up on your way out, that would be awesome. If you found stuff in here and you're not subscribed to the channel and you feel like subscribing, that would also be awesome. Ian says, 4th edition D&D definitely had the best tools for scaling monsters up or down. Yes, I also liked how they categorized the monsters a little bit with those types. Well, they had soldiers and brutes and lurkers, and it wasn't perfect, but it gave you a really at a glance thing of like, oh, this is how I should use it. Like the succubus, like, I don't know, maybe be a lurker or something. So it's like, okay, this thing is supposed to be like trying to get somebody, find a weak person and snag them and get out of there. It's not supposed to be just coming down in front of the party and saying, have at you. And that was good. I liked that. I actually like that more than they're categorizing for player characters. I didn't love so much, but I really liked for the monsters, just in terms of kind of giving more at a glance information, help GMs. As Ian says, the whole game was a war gamer's dream. Probably was. All right, folks, have a great weekend or rest of your day, night, whenever you're watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.